In Vatican Exposed 2020 Part 1, Rome, Italy's Roman Catholic Church, allegedly founded on Peter the Rock, hence the dome of the rock at St. Peter's Basilica, is put into question. Ah yes, Peter. Peter. Worth repeating several times, because if this so-called unbroken line of apostolic succession, which supposedly traces all the way back to the Apostle Peter, can be disproved, then the whole Roman Catholic Church as it is known today is a sham. What a perfect place to start. Yes, let's start at the beginning, shall we? Since its inception. And the big question on everyone's mind right now is, does it? Can it really be traced back that far? Or is this as far-fetched as it sounds? It's a lie. Yes, history teaches us that the Roman Catholic Church cannot verify an unbroken line of popes back to Peter, who was never recorded as the first pope. To think that Peter would magnify himself in such a way and indulge in such pomp and luxury is, in a Christian sense, false and heretical. He would have despised acquiring the title of pope, hence his humble request to be crucified upside down. In Rome, incidentally, for he knew he did not deserve the same martyrdom as Jesus. And despite the latest dubious and somewhat desperate Catholic Church discovery of Peter's remains at the conveniently reopened 1,000-year-old church of Santa Maria in Capella, which was astoundingly overlooked for millennia, not only is it irrelevant that they merely found the remains of a dead man, but the authenticity is still at question, of course. As for papal authority, for over 500 years after the death of Peter, no one had even heard of the title of Pope, because it didn't exist. It was a much later invention. And it wasn't until nearly 1,000 years after Peter's death that the Bishop of Rome was considered to be the Pope of the Universal Church. The official founding of the Roman Catholic Church was in 590 AD by Pope Gregory I. The first Bishop of Rome was Linus, who was not revered as the Vicar of Christ as one is today. As I said, any true disciple of Christ would have denounced such titles, which now venerate the Pope of Rome, including King of Kings, Redeemer, and God on earth. Believe it or not. Paul fails to mention Peter by name as he does in his letter to the Romans, not only because Peter was not Rome's first pope, but because he didn't live there until about the end of his days, as Eusebius of Caesarea, the father of church history, tells us. Furthermore, the RCC's popes aren't the successors of the Apostle Peter, but pagan Emperor Constantine, whose conversion to Christianity was somewhat of a joke, to say the least, and is believed by historians to be more of a convenient political ploy than an actual conversion. Undoubtedly, the idolatrous, cruel, murderous life and disingenuous death of Emperor Constantine testifies otherwise. I briefly mentioned in my They Know What They Do video that it was not upon Peter himself that Jesus would build his assembly in Matthew 16:18, but rather Peter's solid understanding of who Jesus was, the Christ. And all saved Christians with the love of the truth that is Jesus Christ are his assembly, not an institution, and definitely not one as dastardly as the RCC. The literal interpretation of this verse, i.e. the dead remains of Peter, which the RCC is desperately claiming to possess, despite further irrelevance according to sound doctrine, is not only ignorant, but the mindset of a child. So even if Peter was buried in Rome, it doesn't make the slightest difference because the Catholic interpretation of Jesus' very words is wrong. Peter's strong faith in Jesus as Christ was the strong foundation upon which the assembly of like-minded Christians, and not an institution, would be built. Not only is the RCC not founded on Peter the Rock, but what Matthew 16:18 really means isn't that the gates of Hades will not prevail against the church, but those faithful born-again Christians who understand who Jesus is, as Peter once did. And on the contrary, it is this very elect whom the revived Roman Empire of the end times will persecute, Daniel 7:7 and 7:21, i.e., the Roman Catholic Church, according to the prophecy written in the Bible, is actually the enemy of the rock, just as they have been to the rest of humanity over the centuries. And that's a historical fact. The enemy has already established a pagan church, shoddily founded on what can only be described as veneration of the dead, and a woeful misunderstanding, at best, of what is supposed to be their rock. Furthermore, the leader of this pagan church has already fulfilled the role of an antichrist, speaking great blasphemies and attempting to change the word of God, as Daniel 7:25 forewarns. And it is here where many more antichrists shall attempt to do likewise. Coming up in part 2, I will be discussing some of the shocking anti-Christian statements of the incumbent Pope Francis. Although I have played somewhat of a comedian up until now, I just want to let you all know that this is by far no laughing matter. And because of the seriousness of this subject, I shall temporarily put aside some of that humour. That being said, what is this scholar's professional opinion on some of the Pope's latest statements? Let me show you.